What's up? This is Told the Scientist from the Nerd Podcast. The Nerd Podcast is an educational podcast discussing neuroscience topics. The purpose of this podcast is to learn different neuroscience topics and how neuroscience relates to your life or everyday living. Whether you're an expert in neuroscience or a beginner getting into the brain, have the nerve to stick around. Greetings and salutations to all who are listening. This is Told the Scientist from the Nerd Podcast, here to discuss neuroscience topics. So today, I have a special guest with me today. I'm really excited that she's here. Her name is Dr. Ashley Sanderlin from Ohio, but I don't want to take the storm away from you to brag about yourself. So, tell us a little more about yourself.
Okay, so yes, my name is Ashley Sanderlin. I'm originally from Cleveland area, Ohio. I currently live in Winston-Salem, and I'm assistant professor of neuroscience at North Carolina A&T State University, the largest HBCU in the country, and one of the more well-known.
Well-known, wow. I feel like that was kind of shade because I'm a graduate of the North Carolina Central University, so I feel like there was some shady undertone. And, there's this thing between us, I don't know. If you want to do something about it, well, I'm just kidding. But it's good to have you today.
Thank you.
Yeah, really excited that you're here because, one, you came back to Michigan State, you're alum of the neuroscience program, which is the program that I'm in. But you also, gave a really informative talk today. And I was just like, yes, we need to have more conversations like this in person. So I guess the first question I have for you is just tell me more about your research and what you do in the field of neuroscience.
Yeah, so what I do is I'm a cognitive neuroscientist by training. I study the disease Alzheimer's disease, and I'm interested in how people develop Alzheimer's disease. So going from having normal cognition to mild cognitive impairment and then the future progression to Alzheimer's disease. My research focuses on modifiable risk factors for Alzheimer's disease. So how do things like a person's diet or sleep health impact the way that they live and also impact their risk for developing Alzheimer's? And so the work that I do is clinical trial-based work as well as community outreach to help get the word out about how we can protect our brain health and how our lifestyle and the choices we make not just affect our body and our heart, but also affect our brain as we get older.
Absolutely. And so I guess one of the follow-up questions that I have are what are some of those, lifestyle choices that people could, I guess, be more aware of to, have better brain health?
Yeah, so the big one is diet, of course. So being conscious of things like added sugars in diet. Mm-hmm. As we get older, our body's metabolism changes. Mm-hmm. So typically we see things on food labels or in social media or news, and it bases it off of a 2,000 calorie diet, bases life off of a 2,000 calorie diet. But really the way that our body metabolizes nutrients shifts as we get older. And so sometimes a person's metabolism by the age of 65 or 70 may only be able to process 1,400 calories a day.
Okay.
And so being aware of nutrition and what our body really needs, and then also getting a good night's sleep. That is hard to achieve as we get older.
Yeah, I feel like.
But taking that time to really actively engage in prioritizing sleep, our rest. So sometimes rest and wellness, is beyond even our sleep.
Yeah.
So trying to reduce stress in our everyday life and really engaging in things that are fruitful and stimulating and not bringing us down.
Okay. And so I guess to back up a couple of points, you were saying diet is like one of those key things, lifestyle choices that we should, be more aware of. So you say as we get older, we're not supposed to, like the calorie intake is supposed to be lesser because our body doesn't metabolize, as much as we used to when we were younger. So I guess my follow-up question is, are we supposed to continue to eat the same food that we ate when we were younger, just less of it, or are we supposed to, change what we eat as well?
Well, it depends on what we're eating. Everyone has a different diet and we like different things. Yeah. So I think if we adopt a healthier practice, the studies that we did in my postdoc at Wake School of Medicine, we studied a ketogenic diet and how that impacted brain health. So as people cut the carbs, did it help with the metabolism of their food? Did it help with the toxins in the brain that are related to Alzheimer's disease? Were they cleared more regularly? And so we have from previous studies this idea or some evidence to begin to show that actually lowering our carbohydrate intake, so things like rice, pasta, bread,
yep, okay.
All the good stuff, things that have a lot of carbs in them, cake, when we reduce those in our diet, it actually helps with our brain function. And so my study is a sleep study that will also see how diet changes impact our sleep health. So those are still ongoing, but a lot of work has begun to show that, yes, adopting a healthier diet, but then also adapting as we get older to just consuming less is actually better for our health.
Absolutely. I mean, I guess I'm like, 28 now, and so I know the foods or things that I used to eat now, I don't, I guess, eat as much, or I'm not eating as much calories or intaking as much calories, and I feel a lot better, I guess as a grad student, I'm more flexible than I ever been. I'm running as fast as I ever ran before, so I'm just trying to, I guess capitalize on that, if that makes any sense. So I guess the next question that I have for you is, you do clinical trials in your research, right? So how do you go about recruiting patients? I mean, do you focus on like a particular population, or is it, everybody's involved in this type of research you're doing?
So when we start out, we want to recruit all people, but many can guess that in our clinical trials, they tend to be over about 85 to 90% white.
Okay.
So there are different regulations from the government and things that make us really be inclusive of diverse groups. And so one of my focuses when it comes to community outreach and research and recruitment is taking education, but also resources to the community. You can't tell someone, here's some information, and they take it home and eat it for dinner, right? We have to address what are actual needs that people have and begin to open their mind about, how they should begin to think about their life in regards to what we do, aging. But we also have to provide like the basic needs for people. And I think that that is a due diligence that a lot of researchers can provide with the funds that we have. So for clinical trial research, when it comes to recruitment in the African American community, many times it is a long process because it requires trust building.
Yeah.
We have to get into the community. We have to become a trusted source. And we also have to establish ourselves in a way that we are producing and providing a resource that is sustainable. And we're not going to promote what has been done in the past where we come in, we take, and we run away.
Right.
So researchers like myself, are really coalescing to begin to define this science of recruitment science and what is needed for scientists to give back to communities. Because there have been atrocities that have happened, especially in Black communities when it comes to research.
Absolutely.
And people don't forget. So, when we're doing this type of work, we have to have that at the forefront of our mind and also be respectful and humble when we approach people to consider clinical trials and clinical research.
Absolutely. That's why I like you a lot, because you are actually doing the work to try to, rebuild community trust with the Black community, which is a dire need, in my opinion. But now, outside of that, just talking more about your experience in the field of neuroscience, as a graduate student, were you able to connect with, other Black neuroscientists, in your field as you were at Michigan State, or were you like the only one just in the room, doing your thing, showcasing Black excellence?
Well, as you know, when it comes to neuroscience and many of our STEM degrees, oftentimes we are the only one. And so that was the case for me as a graduate student and then also as a postdoc. It really is, a solo journey in that regard. But I found a lot of ways at Michigan State to build community, like through the AGAP program.
Yeah, through AGAP, yep.
Being a Black Graduate Student Association. I was the president of that association, which was really great to connect students together. So I had to be very intentional about building community because when I went inside the walls of my classrooms or buildings that I was in, I was the lone wolf essentially in those spaces. Absolutely.
And so upon building community and outside of your grad program, when you were building community, did you also, in those particular spaces that you're in, begin to talk about what it looks like to rebuild trust amongst the Black community, the ones that are typically, I guess, isolated or, kept away from, higher institutions?
As a graduate student, no, but as a postdoc, that's what I began to get exposed to in North Carolina. I was really shocked when I got to Winston-Salem. It's in Forsyth County, and it's a county where we have almost 30% African-American people.
Yep.
So it's kind of like going to North Carolina, it's almost like going to Atlanta or somewhere. You're kind of in this oasis of Blackness. But there is a big disparity when it comes to the actual wealth and access to things. And so seeing that, it really encouraged me to really pick up this community outreach as a piece of my science because, we can have large Black populations and people can write that into their grants, but they may not have the heart to really provide back to that community. And I think that's where researchers of color come in, is that we have to do right by our people. We have to do our due diligence to do great science, but we also have to be the ones to hold others accountable.
Yes.
Even when we're the junior person. I think that's tough, but we can't just let injustices or things that are not right, if we see them in our spaces, go without something said.
Absolutely. And I guess, do you have any tips or tricks about, I guess, holding people accountable in those different positions? I mean, I know I'm asking, some questions.
You are.
But, any tips or tricks that I guess you could, provide for the people or just people looking to do similar to what you're doing?
I think that's one of those things where you live and you learn. I think, unfortunately, you always start by observing. And then you have a point where you make an observation. And as a scientist, the next thing we do when we see something, we have an observation, is we ask a question. And I think that, it never hurts to question the things that we see, especially if they don't feel right. So even as I was a graduate student, a lot of my PhD work was in neuropsychological assessment at the in the clinical center in the Memory Disorders Clinic here at MSU. And the way that we adjusted our cognitive tests, if a person was African American versus if they were white or Hispanic or Asian, it differed based on their race.
Right.
So I could have a college-educated Black man come in and complete a cognitive assessment, and I could have a white man come in with an 8th grade education. But I would have to adjust down that Black man with the college education's intelligence and other cognitive scores, because the way that the tests were designed, it was adjusting it to where we did worse.
Right.
And it just didn't make any sense. And so even then it was speaking up, it didn't make a change in that immediate time. But now when I'm in this position to select tests and things that I do for my studies, I want to make sure that there's an equitable approach to how we test people's intelligence, because that is really tricky. And a lot of times people take that type of work out of context. Or a lot of researchers do essentially bad research where they will compare Black and white groups and they will present a paper and say, Blacks did this, whites did that. And we really have to get away from that approach. And I think that one thing we can do as researchers is to really focus on within group comparisons.
Absolutely.
So I'm designing a study now where we have all African American participants. Let's look at the whole group and say, what are some within group changes that we see that are significant?
Cool. Absolutely. That is awesome. So now, I guess, coming, to the end of the interview, this is more just a general, broader question. So I guess as a person in the field of neurosciences, I just think that, one, it's the dopest science out there.
I agree.
Yeah, like compared to all other sciences, neuroscience is where it's at. But I would ask, do you think there are potential or new opportunities for, I guess, people that are interested in STEM science, neuroscience, or anything like that? Do you think there's opportunities for them to, one, develop in like different research skills or just develop as an individual to better the social living experiences of others? Do you think there's opportunities in the field of neuroscience?
Absolutely. Always. I think in any science, but also in any work that you do, you start off by just one, having the desire to be a good citizen and make a contribution. There's a saying that, if you can't help people, at least don't hurt them. And so I try to think about that a lot, especially in a clinical setting, or interacting with people that I do not know. You want to be kind to people, and we want to help people as much as possible. But neuroscience is really booming in that almost any science application now can have some type of neuro twist to it, which is really cool, especially when we look at the body, of course. Every organ and organ system is innervated by the nervous system. So, it kind of controls everything, which I think is really cool. But there's a lot of applications that students, if they have a neuroscience, even a major or a graduate degree, can apply that perspective across sciences, but also in industry and in government as well.
Absolutely, because I feel like I think everything in the world just deals with neuroscience. Like I can look at this brain, ray, that's like the brain, neuroscience, of course. Or I think about just different topics. So I studied the gut microbiome. So every time I'm thinking about gut microbiome interaction with the nervous system, so I think, the field of neuroscience, it's legit. And then on top of that, with newer technology coming out to innovate our nervous system, like we definitely need all hands on deck to get this going.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think neuroscience definitely continually needs more diverse perspectives. When we're looking at the research, whether it's from a wet lab perspective, doing animal model research, cell culture, doing human research, interacting with people, like what I do, diverse perspective only brings about more discoveries.
Yes.
If we only think about things from a singular lens, we will never move the field forward. So us being here is making a difference, and hopefully we'll have a lot more people joining us and picking up the torch to be neuroscientists.
Yeah, talk to them. Love that. But I think this will probably conclude the interview that I have for you, Dr. Ashley. So, again, I really do appreciate you coming out here on short notice to be able to give an interview. I also appreciate you coming back to your, alma mater of such to, show other neuroscientists what it means to be a neuroscientist. I definitely appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. Well, everybody, this is Tone the Scientist with the Nerve Podcast featuring Ray the Brain, signing off. Thank you for listening. To stay up to date with us for the next episode, next event, or other neuroscience topics, you can follow us on Instagram at the DA Nerve Podcast. No spaces.